25 secondes. Alrighty, good morning. Happy Saturday, guys, and welcome once again to another episode of The Tripod, where we break down every single NFL game every week from a punting perspective. And we have hit the playoffs. It's going to be exciting. Last week was an absolutely crazy round 17, final week of the regular season. Crazy shit happening. The Patriots giving away the bye. Absolutely mental stuff. We will get into the 4 playoff games this week. Before we get started, though, I would like to say, obviously, you guys are in Australia, most likely listening to this. You would have heard about the terrible bushfires that are raging across the country. The Tripod family has started not a GoFundMe, but a fundraiser to help those affected for the Red Cross. They do a great job there. Every cent that's getting donated will go straight towards the Red Cross to help those in need. We've raised over $1,000 in just one day. So if you would like to contribute, if you've won some money on some multis, or if you win some this weekend, we'd love if you headed over to either the Tripod Facebook page, the Tripod app, or the Tripod Punters Tips Forum group on Facebook. You'll find a link to donate in there, and every cent helps. Jacob, how are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, mate. Yeah, I mean, I love our group for a lot of reasons. And sometimes when we're punting on a game, it feels like life and death. But it's moments like this and the catastrophes that's gone on all around the country that make you realise that, you know, what we talk about is just sport at the end of the day. And some things really do matter a lot more. And it is great that, you know, the country we live in and the group that we have the capability to help out and help each other when they need it. And this is certainly a time where people need help and we can help, and we encourage anyone, any size donation. You know, you might feel a bit powerless when you're seeing all this on the news, but we can all make a little difference. I should say not just happy Saturday, but happy New Year. I'm looking at my laptop and it is 2020.
Crazy.
And I was just thinking, we started the pod, to preview the NRL season in 2015 was the first year. So that means we're coming up on 5 years. We've been doing this, doing NFL for about 3 or 4 years. I remember we started giving out NFL with playoff tips, and we killed it. I think we had like a 15-1 NFL playoffs. We were on Instagram. We actually got a lot of people in America following us. And to this day, we have a Tripod Instagram account we barely use that's followed by a lot of Americans. And Wildcard Weekend is a cracker of a weekend for Aussie sports fans, because you don't usually have many games on Australian weekend. But in America, there's 2 games Saturday, which for us is roughly 7 a.m. and 11 a.m. Sunday. Beautiful, you know, for your typical blokes that work a Monday to Friday, you're catching 2 games. And then there's a third playoff game around 4 a.m., depending, you know, which time zone you're in. Usually you can catch that one before you go to work Monday. So it's pretty good to watch 3 live, high-stakes NFL playoff games.
100%.
And we've only got 4 to break down, but we'll spend a little more time because they are such huge games, and we can. And there's some tough ones, but some interesting matchups. Just one other thing I want to say about our season. Pretty disappointing record on the best bets. I think we're 51%, which is not break even. You need to hit 52.5% to break even. And yet the multis have been insane. We're up over 100 units. And I just think when you've tipped for this many years and this many seasons, it can happen. And I remember seasons in the NRL we've had where we've just killed best bets consistently 60% or better each week. But there'd always be that one game that would cost us winning a bunch of multis, and we'd go like a number of weeks with a dry spell, whereas this has been the opposite. We've somehow had a really good read on a lot of games, as evidenced by all the same gamers that have hit. And we've hit multis basically every week, and I'm talking double-digit multis. But the best bets haven't followed suit. So, look, that's a bit of variance, but it goes to show that we still do know what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in a losing best bet, well, not losing, but pretty much break-even best bet season, we are still well and truly in profit, like you said, from the multis. And you mentioned it, Jacob. Let's start off with the Bills plus 2.5 points at the Houston Texans. 43.5 points is the total, like Jacob mentioned. You guys are probably going back to work on Monday, but you still will be able to watch this game, I believe. It's just after 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Really interesting game, and I think this is probably the matchup. The Texans are always playing in the wildcard weekend. And the Texans, both of these teams actually, pretty much got to rest their key guys last week. The Bills did not need the game. They were locked in. And the Texans were pretty much, well, they were locked in after Kansas City won anyway. But really interesting game. Deshaun Watson has been playing great this season. I think he's had, a very, very good season. And the Bills have as well. I mean, their record speaks for itself. A lot of people will say, look, the Bills didn't play, a crazy... Interesting. I'm getting a pop-up message, but that seems to have gone away. We are all good. Everyone complains that the Bills haven't played an awesome schedule. And look, they haven't, but they have won the games that they should have won. And this is it's not a strange line to me, but it is an interesting line. Generally, you give 3 points for home field. I think maybe in the playoffs, home field matters a little bit more because everyone will be packed. The stadium will be absolutely rocking. So I think you can safely give the Texans 3 points for home field. So this line is saying that the Bills are, equal or a little bit better than the Texans. I don't necessarily think that is the case here. I know that the Texans have, a couple of injuries there. Will Fuller looking doubtful for this one. Hopefully he can still go. But if he can't, it is to the detriment of the Texans. They do have better stats when he is on the field. And even if he is able to go, at least be able to be used as a decoy so they can't just absolutely smother DeAndre Hopkins. But I think even if Will Fuller's not there, I trust Deshaun Watson a little bit more. I think that, they are still the slightly better team here, the Texans, and I think they should be able to do enough when it comes down to it at home in this one.
You spoke about the Bills, who they've played. There is a trend that if you just take the team that has played a significantly stronger strength of schedule through the season,
correct,
you play on them in the playoffs against the side that had a relatively weaker strength of schedule, you do win at a profitable clip. And that makes sense because your general public thinks, oh, they've played 16 games. I've got an idea. I've watched them here and there. I've watched their highlights. I know what their record is, so I roughly know how good this team is. And you figure after 16 games, it evens out. But in truth, some teams play stronger sides than others. And I mean, the Texans came from a stronger division for a start. I know that like a team like Miami got frisky late in the Bills division, but let's not forget even the Texans had to play Indianapolis when they were well and truly alive and had a winning record and looked like a playoff team, had to play them twice earlier this year. They've played a lot of strong sides and they've come out with 10 wins, pretty impressive. And you talk about home field advantage, and one of the reasons that's an advantage, obviously, like you sleeping in your own bed, like you eliminating the travel, so a little bit extra preparation time. But the reason why you might say a playoff game is even stronger advantage is crowd noise. The crowd is that much more amped and excited. And don't disregard it. It makes a difference when a team is trying to communicate at the line of scrimmage on offense and they're the away team and the crowd is going crazy, and it changes the way you can run offense. You can't quickly communicate and tell players, to change their assignment on any given play. It always causes one or two false starts or miscommunications.
Or an additional timeout or something.
Yes, exactly. And it's these little edges that do build up and can be the difference. So that's a real factor. And I think that the public side is actually the Bills. People like what they've seen from the Bills. I think they're getting too much credit from a really impressive Sunday Night Football win against Pittsburgh. But what you got to realize is since then, Pittsburgh really have shown their limitations. So I'm not that impressed that they beat Duck Hodges. I think Pittsburgh was always overachieving and then kind of came back down to earth late. And they're getting credit, the Bills, for playing tough against sides like the Pats. I think lost to them twice in a one-score game. How good are the Pats, really? We're going to get to that in the next game. They also lost to the Ravens by only a touchdown, which the way the Ravens have played is very impressive. But they were down 15 late in that game, get the one touchdown that pulls it within a score. Hey, they did also get the ball back, and there was a chance they could have forced overtime. But in a way, the Ravens never really looked in doubt to lose that game. So the Bills, I agree with you. I think they're more like an average team that has just beaten the sides they should beat. The Texans, I think, are above average. Now, I understand that Will Fuller being questionable hurts Deshaun Watson, no doubt about it. But it's not as if he's this gun-second banana that's had a great year and then got injured last week and now he's out.
Yep.
It's been in and out. He's missed games. He's been on the sideline in games. He's been on the field hampered. So they can deal with that. As much as you can say, oh, well, now the Bills can focus on Hopkins. Every opponent focuses on Hopkins, but he's still one of the very best, wide receivers on the planet.
Yep.
And he's still going to be a nightmare for them to deal with. JJ Watt coming back. He was nearly just about ruled out for the season. I think a torn pec, was it? Or something in that region. But here he is. He's back because they've made the playoffs and he's going to go. And he is a bit of a freak of nature. And it's almost, even if he doesn't affect the game with any huge plays, it's that extra energy and confidence he brings to a defensive unit that has really struggled since he's been out.
Oh,
so I like
sure.
that.
And I think it's not necessarily like he's going to come back and be the old JJ Watt, because he probably won't. But like you said, I think it is more of an emotional boost for the team.
Yeah, captain of the defense. And another hidden factor, I believe, you mentioned Deshaun Watson, great year. I mean, he was in the MVP discussion, at least for the first half of the year, till Lamar kind of extended his case, right? Allen's also had a great year. I think, I didn't check the stats the last 2 weeks, but if you asked anyone which quarterback has the most rushing touchdowns this year, everyone would have said Lamar Jackson. But it was actually Josh Allen, unless Lamar got him in the last week. But roughly, he's had a quality year. But the difference of these two QBs, I think Deshaun has the highest ceiling. I also think Deshaun can be equally good running the football, tucking and running, extremely mobile. But he picks and chooses his spots a bit more because he knows it's important to stay healthy for these games. Where I feel as though Allen doesn't have the luxury to do that. His offense leans on his ability to carry the ball 10-plus times a game and run over people, and that's why he gets these rushing touchdowns. When you get to the playoffs, if you've got that extra gear to go to, this is the time you use it. So I wouldn't be surprised if on a key third down, Deshaun Watson can use his legs and pick it up, and that can change the game. And ultimately, I think the Texans are the better team at home, and I think we're doing well to catch under a field or to lay less than a field goal.
Yep, totally agree with you, mate. And we do have three best bets on this one. We are taking we're laying the 2.5 with the Texans. The best price that we found on that one is $1.86 on Unibet. We're going to take the Texans to win the first half. That one's $1.88 on Unibet in the three-way market, so they do have to win the first half outright. No money back if it's a tie. And we will take the Texans race to 20. It's a great plus money price at $2.10 on BetEasy. Make sure if you have BetEasy, you bet it on there, because that bet is $1.90 or lower on pretty much all the other sites, I think. Let's move on to the Titans plus 4.5 at the Patriots. 44.5 is the total. Crazy this one that the Pats are even playing this week. We all saw what happened last week. All they had to do was beat a Miami Dolphins team to get the first round bye, and they couldn't do it. Crazy circumstances there. Fitzpatrick drives them down the field for a late touchdown with 30 seconds left to win by 3. So that is certainly disappointing for the Patriots here. This line does seem strange to me. You always think of the Pats as this, unbeatable team at home, and that Foxborough is sort of worth 4 points as one of the stronger home fields in the league. So they're really saying the Patriots are only half a point better than the Titans. And you could, I guess, make that case because the Pats down the stretch haven't been great. That's for sure. Everyone thought they were world beaters at the start of the season. They acquired Antonio Brown, but they just have had injuries throughout the season, especially, you lose Antonio Brown. And then Edelman's been banged up for a number of weeks now. He's got the knee and the shoulder. Even though he looks like he's going to be able to go for this one, he's probably not going to be 100%. And then Brady's throwing to some of these rookie wide receivers like N'Keal Harry and stuff. But look, oh my god, the chair just fucking went absolutely down. Did you see that?
Mate, you've had a fair bit of Christmas pudding, obviously.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. But anyway, at the end of the day, I still do trust the Pats more. I trust Belichick. I trust Brady to get it done in a playoff spot. I'm still not convinced that this Titans team is legit. I know that they have had a good run down the stretch and they have been piling on points and Tannehill has been doing well. But you look at some of those teams that they have played down the stretch, they have been below average defenses a few times. Texans twice is a below average defense. They played the Chiefs and stuff like that. So they have had a few higher scoring games. I also kind of like the fact that I know that the Pats lost last week. Edelman only got 3 catches, but he was a little bit banged up. But I like that Brady got everyone else involved. I think they had 7 or 8 receivers with 3 catches. So
he got the Dolphins defense involved too.
Starting to be a little bit more involved there. And I know that what I don't like about the Titans last week is that they absolutely fed Derrick Henry. He's pretty much the cog that runs this team. And they rely on him very heavily in the run game. 32 carries is a shitload of carries last week. 211 yards, yes. But I think that takes the wear and tear on him. I know he's an absolute beast. But I think that running him 32 times and getting, tackled a bunch of times there, that is going to wear on his body. So, look, I have a slight lean to the Pats. I'm not over the moon about playing the Pats at this number, but certainly don't want to take the Titans. I do trust the Pats to get the job done here.
And that's why you see no best bets, because Alex would have lent towards seeing value in the Patriots, and I wanted to make the opposite case, so I will, and we might have a side bet, and we'll let you guys know the terms of it. But I would be taking the Titans, and here's why. I mean, the Pats, they started the season undefeated. We were talking about this defense being like a once in a couple of times a decade level of defense. It did come back to earth a bit, because what were they, about 7-0, 8-0 before they lost to the Ravens, and now they've lost about 4 games this year. And the whole year, it was never in doubt that they would finish with a top 2 seed and a bye. And for a team like this, that has a mastermind head coach with 2 weeks to prepare, is almost unbeatable with a 42-year-old QB and, some other veteran players that like to rest up. That bye is just so crucial. They've never made the Super Bowl when they didn't have a bye. And when they do get a bye, they make the Super Bowl more than half the time. So that was just always the goal. And they won the games they needed to. And I made excuses for them when they lost at the Texans or at the Ravens. But they fell behind and, they just didn't show their full hand when they really needed to, such as the Bills game a couple weeks ago. They pulled it out. And I completely expected them to do what they needed to do against the Dolphins. And we did back them. We had them in a bunch of multis. Personally, that cost me absolute mozza. Yes. Had some multis. My only losing leg is $1.10 Patriots. The second, how do I phrase this? The second biggest upset in the last 25 years, in that a 17-point favorite has lost. It's just mind-boggling that they could lose that game. I know Brady throws a pick 6 in the first half, but you still recover to be 10-all, and you still ultimately give up 80 yards to Fitzmagic. Now, we know he's called Fitzmagic for a reason, but I don't want to knee-jerk and overreact to that loss, but I do think it could speak volumes that this team is not as capable as years past, because if they can't win that game, how far can they really go? I actually feel it's not a dream crusher, because you're in the playoffs, you've always got a chance. But now they'd have to win this game, they'd have to win at Kansas City and at Ravens potentially to make the Super Bowl. It's so much tougher. Their probability to win the Super Bowl went from like 18%, or call it 20% if they would have beat the Dolphins, to under 5% now that they didn't. Like, that's a huge chunk of a chance to, get the goal, which is what they set out to achieve every year.
Yeah.
The Titans don't set out to win the Super Bowl. For them, to win a playoff game would be a great achievement. I mean, a month into the season, no one was even thinking they could make the playoffs. And that's a key point too, because something changed at that point. After about week 5 or 6 was when they benched Mariota, who had been playing putrid at quarterback.
He was bad.
And went with Tannehill. And then Tannehill had a couple of mediocre weeks. And since then, even if you lump together every start of Tannehill, they're scoring over 30 points a game. They're the second best offense in the league. And A.J. Brown, this rookie wide receiver, is absolute monster. You spoke about Derrick Henry. Yeah, they shouldn't have ran him 32 times, but it was to get the rushing title. Once Nick Chubb had a below par game, that was in reach, and they want to just keep feeding him. And look, it's not ideal, but he is a Terminator, and he actually is the kind of player that helps you win cold weather playoff games, Derrick Henry, because he's fucking hard to tackle. So that gives this team confidence. I think Tannehill, a little bit the point I made about Deshaun Watson, similar. When he needs to, I think he can be a mobile threat. He, played wide receiver, as people know, in college for a season or two. He actually is bloody mobile when he wants to be, and they don't overuse it, but they will when they need to. They're going to respect the hell out of the Patriots. They know how hard it is to win a playoff game in Foxborough. I mean, the coach of Vrabel is from the Patriots institution. They respect him, but don't fear him either. They beat him last year, and this Tennessee team has played good ball. And the other thing I like about Tennessee, 2 weeks ago played the Saints, but the way that the schedule shook out and the fact that that was a non-conference opponent, the result didn't really matter. They knew it all came down to the following week. I think they held a couple players out and didn't kind of show their full hand in that game. And then last week, yes, it was a must-win, but I don't feel like they got gassed by it because Houston waved the white flag and played their scrubs. So I kind of like the fact that Tennessee's relatively fresh coming into this game, whereas the Pats arguably have had to play tougher games more recently. Brady's been awful, and I've kind of been saying I think he can go to another level when he needs to, but now I'm really questioning it. Maybe Father Time catches up to him. So I think the Titans absolutely can win, or at least keep it close, and that's my case for a while like Tennessee.
Indeed, and that's why we're staying away. One more quick thing that I would add. I think we were on opposite sides of the total as well, Jacob. If I had to play the total, I certainly do think that 44.5 is probably a tad high here. You do have a banged-up Pats team coming in that has shown that they've struggled to score points recently. And the Titans, once again, it's a cold weather game here in New England. And the Titans, look, I think that their stats are a little bit inflated, as I said, in terms of scoring, seeing as they've played a bunch of shithole defenses on the stretch home. The Pats defense is still elite. It is the number 1 pass defense in the league. It is the number 6 rush defense in the league. I don't think the Titans are going to be able to, run it all over the Pats either. So 44.5 for a cold weather playoff game, I think, is a tad bit high. Let's move on to another interesting game. The Vikings plus 7.5 points at the Saints. 49.5 is the total. I think, honestly, everyone and their dog is going to be betting the Saints here. Everyone's seen what they've done. They've gotten a lot of media hype. They've been crushing teams down the stretch. Drew Brees had a ridiculous game a few weeks back, broke the completion record. I think it was 4 or 5 TDs. And they've just been crushing teams lately. Look, I'd like to say the playoffs are different, and I do think that they are. Teams step up in the playoffs. And the Vikings are not a bad team here. I understand it is in New Orleans, but the Vikings are decent. You look at Kirk Cousins and the season that he has had. He has quietly had a very, very good season. Statistically, he has been one of the best quarterbacks in the league, stats-wise this season, and has been the best quarterback in fourth quarters this season. So he has been clutch for the Vikings. Dalvin Cook has been out the last couple of weeks. I think that's a good thing. I know it's not a good thing that he was injured, but pretty much as soon as the Vikings knew they were locked into their spot 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, they said, look, we're going to rest Dalvin Cook for the next 2 games. And they did that. He was ready to go last week. He could have played. He didn't. I think that's a good thing. He's had a long season. He's been awesome for them. And he's got a lot of miles on his legs from this season. So he's going to be fresh. I think that's very, very good for this Vikings team because they do rely on the run game to open up a little bit for their wide receivers. I think it's great that he's rested, healthy. Thielen has also been pretty much banged up all season long, and it's just been Diggs. And when it's just Diggs, you can kind of, I know that he still is a beast and he'll get his. But when you have a healthy Thielen out there, I think it makes a big difference. So I think this Vikings team, their stats have been a little bit suppressed as well because they haven't been as healthy. I understand that's the same case for the Saints. And they are a scary as fuck team. I think it's been great for them that Drew Brees had that little injury mid-season. He got 6 weeks, and he's old as well. So I think he's playing, usually sort of trails off in terms of, his quality of play down the stretch of the season, but he seems to have been getting better. So I know that the Saints are going to be very, very good here. But I just think the Vikings have enough to hang around. They've come out and said they're going to absolutely feed Dalvin Cook. I think that's good in the fact that he is probably their best player. But I think it's not good in the fact that, the Saints have an elite rush defense. But what I do think it does is certainly choose clock. I think the Vikings will look to run with Dalvin Cook a lot because he is fresh and they've come out and said that they're going to run a lot with him. I think the Saints are going to look to run a fair bit with Kamara. They seem to have rested him slightly last week, only 7 carries. So I think they were sort of looking a little bit ahead to this Vikings game. So I do think both teams run the ball a fair bit. So I do like the under in this one. And I think the Vikings can hang around. I think they're coming in a little bit underrated, having rested some key guys down the stretch. And I think the Saints, although they are probably the best team in the NFC, I think they're coming in flying a bit too high in the public side, for my mind.
That's right. The Saints may well be the best team in the NFC, and you remember that epic, maybe game of the year they played against the 49ers, which essentially ended up deciding the number 1 seed. It comes down to a 4th down and 2. Kittle goes into dad mode and goes 40 yards, and they get that field goal final play, and the Niners get the road win 48-46. And in the end, the Niners, I think, finished 13-3 and a number 1 seed, and the Saints finished 13-3 and in the 3 seed. But had that, you don't get that one play. Now we're talking about a 14-2 Saints that missed Drew Brees for 6 weeks and still won 14 games and got the number 1 seed. So that's how fine the line is, and we saw how close the Niners were to also slipping from that seed. If Seattle gets basically a couple more millimeters on the final play of Sunday Night Football, that Seattle couldn't get a bye, that would have actually been the Saints that would have got a bye. And I do wonder in the back of their mind, is there a letdown factor there that they've had a really good year and you cannot get any closer to a bye week than what the Saints did? But here they are, they've got to play. Kind of like the Patriots, these teams with the really high expectations, when they didn't get a bye, you can't help but think, well, we want to win the Super Bowl and it's going to be bloody tough. We've got to win this game and then we've got to get through 2 more road games against like some really strong opposition. But in saying that, obviously we know what the Saints can do. Although I will say, since that 49ers game, a couple of things happened. They copped quite a few injuries to key defensive players. Now, some like the starting linebackers are back for this one. Other guys, like they lost Davenport for the season, lost Sheldon Rankins for the season. And who have they played since then? I mean, they played a Monday Night Football game, which you referred to, where Breeze went 29-30. They looked unbeatable. The Colts were horrendous. The Colts did not turn up to play. They played a Titans game that I already alluded to the fact that Tennessee didn't really need to win. So we're going to give the Saints a lot of credit for a road win in Tennessee, but it's actually not as impressive as it looks. They played a Carolina team that couldn't wait for the year to end last week. So in a way, are we overrating the Saints on recent performance because they've destroyed their last 3 opponents? And as you said, are we underrating the Vikings because they're in a unique circumstances where they're fighting for a wild card, and the last team that could have taken that spot would have been the Rams.
Yep.
The Rams pushed the 49ers to the wire on a Saturday game, but lost. From that Saturday 2 weeks ago, the Vikings knew they could not get any higher than a wild card and being on the road in week 1 of the playoffs, and they could not drop out. And as you said, they got to rest guys for 2 straight weeks. So, yeah, they lost by double digits to Green Bay on Monday Night Football, but we were all over Green Bay. We knew the Vikings didn't need it. Throw that out the window.
Yep.
They played all their backups against the Bears last week, and they still nearly won. They lost on a final second field goal. That's a preseason game. And you and I have deep dived.
This is no accident that they rested players, and it's not because of injury. Because, like you said, as soon as the Rams lost, like the Vikings didn't wait till just before their game that week to say, we're resting guys. Literally an hour or half an hour after the Rams lost, they came out and said, all right, we're resting guys for the last 2 weeks.
Exactly, which means that Dalvin Cook would have played if they needed to make the playoffs. Yes. But it's a luxury. And you and I are deep diving in these games, and we're really reading long injury lists. And then there's guys who are going to play who have injuries we don't even know about. It's a war of attrition in the NFL, NRL too.
Also.
But to get 2 weeks where you can pick and choose how many snaps guys plays, or you don't have to even train them hard in practice because they're not going to play much that week, that is such a huge hidden edge. And if anything, the public is actually going to read into it the wrong way and say the Vikings aren't very good because of what they saw the product on the field. And the truth is the Vikings have had their eyes set on this weekend for 19 straight days. So I love that edge. You talked about how Cousins has had a really good year. It's very well publicized. He fails time and time again in the prime time, in the bright lights. I mean, some people looked into that more closely and said he fails when the game is not at 1 p.m. local time, which obviously usually when you're not playing at 1 p.m., it is a marquee game. As it turns out, you get it both ways here. It's a prime game in that it's a playoff game, but it's an afternoon game. It's a 1 p.m. start. So you read into that how you like. I'm kind of still a Cousins believer. I think he's an above-average QB. I'll even ask the question, everyone's minds, they think Breeze is better than Cousins, but is he at this point? Cousins is in like the prime of his career. Breeze is obviously at the tail end. There's been some stats that show Breeze doesn't throw it as far down the field as he used to. We know he's got like a video game receiver in Michael Thomas that he can always seem to get a completion to, but how far does that go? I mean, speaking of wide receivers, Thielen's health is important, but it goes back to my point that Thielen's been dealing with hammy issue, and they're saying he's good to go, and it had to have helped being able to, get through playing limited snaps and limited drills at training. So I really feel like they can move the ball in offense. Dalvin Cook is a dynamic running back, and look, is the shoulder 100%? We don't know, but he's going to have some fresh legs in this one. And I don't think the Vikings are afraid of the Saints. I don't think that the Minnesota Miracle revenge factors into that because the Vikings failed the very next week. It's funny, the Saints' last 2 playoff runs have ended in absolute heartbreak. The Minnesota Miracle and then the blown PI no call against the Rams. And they lose in overtime. So, but it could be another disappointment for the Saints. I don't know if they win. Of course, you'd think they will. But we're getting over a touchdown with the Vikings. They're the right side. And I agree with you that unders being the play. The Saints, because they are a strong home favorite over a touchdown, I think they want to come out and not give the Vikings any free possessions, not take too many risks. And that would also mean they're going to keep the ball on the ground with Kamara and a very good second running back in Latavius Murray too.
Indeed, and this line is coming down a little bit, opened around 9, and it's down to about 7.5 now. But we have found, I think, the last remaining Vikings plus 9, that is $1.82 on Unibet. And we've taken a couple of Saints unders. As we said, we like the Vikes, we like the under. We're taking the Saints team total under 30 points. That's $1.95 in the Bet365 three-way market. And we're taking the Saints team total under 14.5 points in the first half. That one is $1.80 on Sportsbet. And to finish off the week, I guess you could argue that these are two of the more banged up teams in the wildcard round. That's for sure. The Seahawks laying 1.5 points at the Philadelphia Eagles. 45.5 points is the total. Both teams absolutely banged up. Obviously, we know that the Seahawks lost Carson and Penny. They're two best running backs, and they have been leaning on them massively this year. And Carson has had an awesome season, and Penny was starting to hit his straps at the right time down the stretch as well. So, now they're down to their, pretty much third string running back in Travis Homer, and they've had to bring in, Marshawn Lynch as well to take some carries, and the dude hasn't been on the field for a year. So, they did okay last week. But the Eagles are banged up as well, and they have pretty much been throughout the season. But it looks like Miles Sanders is going to be good to go with this one. He's had the MRI on the ankle. It's not a high ankle sprain, which is always the worry. So he's going to be good. Not good to go necessarily. He's probably not going to be 100%, but he's going to be able to play. We all know the injuries to the Eagles wide receivers. Aguilar out, Alshon Jeffrey out. Obviously, they lost Deshaun Jackson at the start of the year. But you still have Ertz. He's banged up, yes, but I think he's going to be right to go for this one, and I think they need him out there, even, if anything, as a decoy. But, what the Ertz injury has done for this Philly team is it's shown the emergence of Dallas Goedert as the second tight end there. He's really stepped up. He's a big-bodied presence, and I think, that's what you need, especially when you're missing these speedy wide receivers that are able to get open in space. To have just a big-bodied tight end like Zach Ertz or Dallas Goedert to throw up a jump ball to, that can certainly help. I think that Wentz has been playing very well this season. And, the Seahawks, while I do think that they are probably the better team than this Eagles team as they're currently constructed, so banged up, I do not think the Seahawks should be favored in this one. It is, once again, the Eagles are at home here, and this is the longest trip that any of the away teams have to make in the wild card round. The Seahawks coming all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast. I think, a lot of that's probably factored in slightly to this line, but I think that's a huge advantage for the Eagles in this one, given the travel distance. So, even though I think that the Seahawks are better, they're only slightly better, and I certainly don't think that they should be favored in this one away from home.
Yeah, we struggled with this game at first, but the more we dive into it, I do feel we got the right side now. And they're two teams that we actually want to bet against.
Yeah.
So if they weren't playing each other, we'd probably be backing against both these sides. But you look at it, I actually predicted, I think, a week ago that if this was the matchup, I would make Philadelphia a small favorite. And maybe I understand that I was wrong because Seattle are a small favorite. I think the fight that Seattle showed, we saw how depleted they were. You talked about the running back position. I'll just say on running back, you might say, oh, well, Marshawn Lynch is a beast, so it's not really a downgrade. And they did fine last week. But Chris Carson had a really great year. They will miss him. And it's just the little things. It's the continuity with the offensive line. It's that one blitz that if, the new guy, Homer, who's only played 8 or only had 8 carries before in the season, doesn't pick up that blitz and Russell Wilson gets lit up, that can be the key moment in the game. So it's more than just the ability to, put your head down and run for 4 or 5 yards a carry. That could be important. But look, I give them a lot of credit that San Francisco is an elite team that came in with a purpose to win the number 1 seed, to win that game, and led the whole game. And Seattle fought back. And as I said, there was no Clowney, there was no Diggs. They were so depleted at running back. They still, as we know, came within a millimeter of winning that game. So I give them credit. Can they win this one? Of course they can. I think people will look at it too simplistically, which I often see happens. late in the season when it's like a must-win game to get into the playoffs or in playoff games, people often just ask themselves the question, who's the better team? Because if it's a close game, I think the better team will win.
Right.
They kind of disregard home advantage, but it is important. I know that you might make a case. I think Seattle went 7-1 on the road this year, but just 4-4 at home. So they're a better road team, but I'm not buying that.
No, it's just one season.
You can look at each of those games. That's a small sample size. Look at the last decade and see how dominant Seattle is at home. We talk about them being one of the better home advantages. They get so loud. Now you flip that. This Eagles joint is going to be so full of energy. They're so happy. They're playing with house money, really.
Well,
they won the Super Bowl 2 years. They won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. They're bloody stoked about that. They made a late run and won the division last year and won a playoff game last year. This year, you talk about all the injuries they've had, and yet they still beat their bitter rivals. Dallas kicked them out. They love that. Got the job done last week. Get to the playoffs again. So it's like a confident team that is playing for each other and, in a way, nothing to lose. They're going to not be playing with any fear, whereas Seattle's got to say to themselves, geez, we did all the hard work. We went to San Fran. We won that game in overtime. And then we go and slip on a banana peel against the Cardinals. And here we are facing elimination where we should have been a bye team and we should have been a Super Bowl contender. And you talk about Ertz being out. I mean, he broke his ribs in the first quarter against Dallas. They still had a very impressive win in that game. He didn't play last week. It has opened the door for Goddard to, be a possession receiver. Greg Ward has come out. This guy was a quarterback in college. He's like probably their best wide receiver now. They also love throwing it in the flat to their running backs, which is why Miles Sanders is so important. Another Penn State running back, and he looks to me like a poor man's Saquon Barkley, which is a compliment. And Boston Scott is the backup running back who is like a kick returner. And when he gets it in space, he can create big plays. And they love throwing screens to their tight ends as well. So that's what they'll be looking to do. But I've got to give a massive shout out to Carson Wentz. With the injuries he's had, the only quarterback ever to throw for 4,000 yards or more with not one receiver having 500 plus yards.
Crazy.
That shows that he's great. So don't tell me you're picking the Seahawks because Russell Wilson and in the fourth quarter you trust him. Russell Wilson is amazing. And I do admit that I mentioned it with Tannehill and Deshaun Watson, these QBs kind of have that skeleton key that if they need to, they can become a running back. Wilson is like that. But I tell you, Wentz has had a whale of a year, and I'm not going to, downgrade what he can do at home in this game. And ultimately, I agree with you that I just don't think Philly should be the underdog in this one. And actually, I think slight money may be coming for the Eagles. I know, obviously, Lane Johnson being out hurts, but these two teams are both so banged up. The healthiest unit of all is the Philadelphia defense.
Yep.
And I think that can be what they can ride to a victory here.
Yeah, 100%. And we all know that the struggles that the Seahawks defense has had all season long. So by no means a slam dunk, like Jacob said, but no bets are a slam dunk. All we're saying is that we think that the Eagles should probably be slight favourites, not slight underdogs. We will be taking the Eagles plus 2.5 points. You'll find that one on Unibet at $1.84. And we'll also take the Eagles plus 0.5 point in the first half. You'll find that one on BetEasy at $1.85. And that will wrap it. Thanks, guys, again for watching. Very exciting weekend coming up. I think we've got 4 really good matchups for this week. After the crazy stuff that happened in Week 17 last week, I think we probably will have some more crazy stuff happen this week. It's not often that all the favourites win in wildcard round, that's for sure. So should be an absolute cracker of a week. Make sure you're ready to go tomorrow. Usually there is no NFL on tomorrow, like Jacob said, but there's 2 games starting from 7 tomorrow, which should be really, really good ones. Jacob, anything else you wanted to add before we get out of here on a Saturday?
Well, people may or may not know we always do really well in NFL playoffs. So we seem to find another gear as some of these teams do. And it's been an awesome season, and it's going to be a very exciting playoffs too. And encourage people to, if they don't get to catch too many games through the year, this is a great weekend to watch because everyone's going to lay it all on the line. And just to echo what you said at the start of the pod, get in our group and look for that top pin post, the bushfire appeal, and anything. If it's an extra $20 you would have thrown on a bet, maybe put it towards a good cause, or if you've had a little win recently, put a little bit of the winnings into that because it feels good to make a difference, and it does make a difference, and it's important. There's people really needing that help right now. and just enjoy the weekend and enjoy the great games we've got coming up, lads.
100%. I would suggest what you want to do is if you can only spare, let's say, like $20 or something, maybe throw in a $10 donation and then throw the other 10 on a few multis or something like that. And if any of those multis get up, just throw those profits straight into the donation. I know that's what I'll be doing this weekend for the NFL. Have a great weekend, guys. We will be posting some multis up later on this afternoon. We'll have a 365 multi, probably a Unibet multi, and a bunch of same gamers for this weekend. So keep your eyes peeled in the Tripod app for those ones. But have a good weekend, guys, and we will see you next week. Thanks for watching.